My name is Angelina, and at 30, I finally achieved what I've been dreaming of since childhood, buying my own apartment. After years of saving every penny working overtime and sacrificing vacations, I finally had a place to call my own. My heart swelled with pride when I turned the key for the first time. Then my father called. He demanded I give my new apartment to my sister Jessica because she deserved it more. His words crushed me, but for once, I stood my ground. Before I tell you how I discovered my sister's secret that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for what's rightfully yours. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a small town in the Midwest where everyone knew everyone. Our family wasn't wealthy, but we had enough to get by. My father worked as a construction foreman, and my mother was an elementary school teacher until she passed away when I was 12. After that, our family dynamic shifted dramatically. Jessica was only 9 when we lost Mom, and perhaps that's why Dad began treating her differently. She became his clear favorite, the daughter who could do no wrong while I became invisible unless I was needed for something. When Jessica wanted new clothes, she got them. When I needed them, I was told to be practical and make do with what I had. This pattern continued throughout our childhood, creating a rift between us that widened with each passing year. Jessica is more delicate than you, Angelina, my father would say whenever I questioned the unfairness. She needs more support. You're stronger, you can handle things on your own. His words meant as a compliment felt like punishment for my independence. By 16, I was working part-time at the local diner after school, saving every dollar I could. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. My college fund was mysteriously depleted to cover Jessica's dance lessons, and later her car repairs after she crashed the vehicle. Dad bought her for her 16th birthday. I never got a car. Instead, I rode my bicycle everywhere until I saved enough to buy a secondhand scooter that broke down more often than it ran. Jessica never held a steady job. Why would she? Dad covered her rent when she moved out, paid her phone bill, and gave her a generous allowance, well into her 20s. Meanwhile, I worked through community college, earning scholarships to cover what my savings couldn't. I studied marketing, discovering I had a knack for understanding consumer behavior and creating campaigns that resonated with people. When I graduated, I immediately moved to Chicago. The distance from my family wasn't accidental. I needed space to build my own life free from the constant comparison and inevitable disappointment. In the city, I found a marketing assistant position at a mid-sized agency. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. For 5 years, I shared an apartment with 3 different roommates, saved every possible penny, worked overtime whenever it was offered, and took freelance projects on weekends. I lived frugally, tracking every expense in a detailed spreadsheet. No fancy coffee shops, no impulsive shopping, no vacations, just work and saving. All the while, I maintained minimal contact with my family. The occasional phone call with Dad usually ended with him telling me about Jessica's latest accomplishment or crisis. She'd gotten a promotion at the job he helped her get, or she'd broken up with another boyfriend and needed emotional support. Never once did he ask about my life or my dreams. "You're doing fine," he'd say dismissively if I ever mentioned a professional achievement. "You've always been self-sufficient." What he meant was, you don't need me, so I don't need to care. Despite everything, a part of me still yearned for his approval. That little girl who lost her mother too young still existed somewhere inside me, desperate for her father to see her value. But as the years passed, I realized that validation might never come. Instead, I focused on validating myself through achievement and independence. By 29, I had been promoted twice and had saved enough for a down payment on a modest apartment. It wasn't much compared to what some of my colleagues owned, but it would be mine. All mine. And I had earned every square inch through my own hard work and determination. The apartment search lasted nearly 6 months. Every weekend I met with real estate agents, viewed listings online, and attended open houses. I faced numerous rejections from banks and sellers who preferred buyers with co-signers or higher down payments. But I persisted, knowing that somewhere out there was the perfect place for me to call home. And then I found it. A 2-bedroom apartment in Lakeview, not the fanciest neighborhood, but safe and convenient. The building was older, but well-maintained with character that newer developments lacked. The apartment itself wasn't huge, but it had high ceilings, hardwood floors, with only minor scratches, and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. The second bedroom would make a perfect home office for my freelance work. I still remember the butterflies in my stomach when I submitted my offer. It was slightly below asking price, all I could afford, even with my savings. 3 agonizing days later, the seller accepted. I nearly cried when my real estate agent called with the news. The mortgage application process was another battle. As a single woman with no cosigner, I faced extra scrutiny from the bank. They questioned my job stability, income projections, and savings history. I provided documentation after documentation, proving my financial responsibility and capability. When the approval finally came through, I felt a sense of validation that no promotion or praise had ever given me. Signing those mortgage papers alone was both terrifying and exhilarating. My hand trembled slightly as I scrawled my signature on page after page. This was it, the biggest financial commitment of my life, and I was making it entirely on my own. No safety net, no parental support, no partner to share the burden. Just me, Angelina Reyes, homeowner. Moving day arrived in early April. The weather was unseasonably warm, as if celebrating this new chapter with me. My friends Maria and Taylor helped me move along with Taylor's boyfriend Sam, who owned a truck. We made countless trips up and down the elevator, carrying boxes and the few pieces of furniture I owned. "This place is amazing, Angie," Maria said, as we collapsed onto my secondhand couch after the last box was brought up. "I'm so proud of you." Her words meant everything. Maria had been there through the tears, the doubts, and the endless saving. She understood what this apartment represented. Over the next few days, I transformed the space into my home. I painted the living room a soft sage green, hung art I'd collected over the years, and arranged my books on shelves I installed myself after watching numerous DIY videos. Nothing matched perfectly, and some pieces were clearly budget finds, but every item had been chosen with care and represented my journey. 1 week after moving in, I hosted a small dinner party for the friends who had supported me through everything. Maria brought homemade lasagna, Taylor brought wine, and Sam brought a houseplant as a housewarming gift. We sat around my small dining table laughing and celebrating until nearly midnight. To Angelina, Maria raised her glass, who proved that determination and hard work still mean something in this world. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely at peace. This was my sanctuary earned through years of sacrifice and determination. That peace lasted exactly 8 days. The call came on a Thursday evening as I was preparing a simple dinner of pasta and salad. Dad's name flashed on my phone screen, something that usually happened only on holidays or when there was family news to share. "Angelina," he said after I answered, his voice oddly formal. "Jessica and I will be visiting you this Saturday. We'd like to see this new place of yours." No question about whether I was available, no congratulations on my purchase. Just an announcement that disrupted my weekend plans and sent anxiety coursing through my body. "Sure, Dad," I replied, automatically falling back into old patterns of acquiescence. "What time should I expect you?" "We'll be there around 11 in the morning. Text me your address." And just like that, my sanctuary was about to be invaded. Saturday arrived with gloomy skies that matched my mood. I had spent Friday evening cleaning an already clean apartment and preparing snacks I wasn't sure anyone would eat. At precisely 11, the doorbell rang. Dad looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer and his face more lined. Jessica stood beside him, dressed expensively as always, her designer purse probably costing more than my entire outfit. She hugged me with the artificial warmth of someone embracing a distant acquaintance. "So, this is it," Dad said, stepping into my living room and looking around with critical eyes. "It's smaller than I expected." "It's perfect for me," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "The paint color is interesting," Jessica commented, running her finger along my bookshelf as if checking for dust. "Very unique." I gave them the brief tour showing the kitchen with its updated but not new appliances. The bathroom I had painstakingly recaulked myself, my bedroom with the secondhand queen bed, and finally, my pride and joy, the home office with a desk I had refinished. What do you need a second bedroom for? Jessica asked, frowning slightly. It seems wasteful for just one person. I work from home sometimes, I explained, and occasionally I have friends stay over. We returned to the living room where I served coffee and the pastries I'd picked up that morning from the bakery down the street. An uncomfortable silence settled over us as Dad sipped his coffee with a contemplative expression. Angelina, he finally said, setting down his cup with deliberate slowness, we need to discuss something important. The serious tone made my stomach knot instantly. In my family, important discussions never led to anything positive for me. Jessica has been having some difficulties lately, he continued. Her landlord sold her building and she's been asked to vacate. She needs a place to stay. I glanced at Jessica, who suddenly looked tearful, playing the victim role she had perfected over the years. That's awful, I said, genuinely sympathetic despite our history. When do you have to be out? End of the month, she sniffled. I've looked everywhere, but with the current rental market, there's nothing affordable available. Not in safe neighborhoods anyway. I took a deep breath. Well, you could stay here temporarily while you look for something. The sofa pulls out into a bed and it's actually quite comfortable. Dad cleared his throat, exchanging a look with Jessica that sent warning bells ringing in my head. Actually, he said, we were thinking of something more permanent. This apartment has 2 bedrooms. You don't really need both. I stared at him, not fully comprehending what he was suggesting. Jessica could move in here, he continued. It would solve everything. You want me to share my apartment with Jessica? I asked, still not grasping the full implication. Dad's expression hardened. Not exactly. We think you should give Jessica your apartment. The words hung in the air like toxic gas. Give Jessica my apartment. The apartment I had sacrificed everything for. The apartment that represented my independence and achievement. I don't understand, I said slowly. You want me to give up my apartment that I just bought? Where would I go? You could find a rental, Jessica interjected, as if offering a helpful suggestion. You're good at finding deals, and you're always talking about how you like trying different neighborhoods. Or you could move back home for a while, Dad added. Save some money. The audacity of their suggestion rendered me momentarily speechless. They weren't just asking me to share my space, they wanted me to surrender it entirely. This is my home, I finally managed. I worked years to afford it. I can't just give it away. Jessica deserves some stability right now, Dad said, his voice taking on that familiar tone that brooked no argument. She's going through a lot. You're doing fine. You've always been more capable. There it was again, my self-sufficiency used as a weapon against me. My success punished while Jessica's failures were rewarded. I'm sorry about Jessica's situation, but this is my apartment, I said, my voice firmer now. I'm not giving it up. Jessica's tears, which had been threatening, now flowed freely. I knew you'd be selfish about this, she sobbed. You've always resented me. This isn't about resentment, I countered. It's about basic fairness. Why should I have to give up my home because you lost yours? Because family helps family, Dad snapped. And there's something else you should know. Jessica is pregnant. This new information hit me like a physical blow. Jessica pregnant. She wasn't even in a serious relationship as far as I knew. 3 months along, Jessica added, placing a protective hand over her still flat stomach. I need stability for my baby, a safe place. Surely you can understand that. The manipulation was obvious but effective. A wave of guilt washed over me quickly, followed by anger at being made to feel guilty for protecting what was rightfully mine. I'm sorry about your situation, I said carefully. But there are other solutions besides taking my home. Dad could help you find a place, or you could apply for housing assistance. So you're refusing to help your own sister, your own niece or nephew? Dad's voice rose in volume. After everything this family has done for you, everything this family had done for me. What exactly was that? The years of emotional neglect, the financial favoritism, the constant messaging that I mattered less. I'm not refusing to help, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I'm refusing to give up my home. There's a difference. The argument escalated quickly after that. Dad's face turned red with anger. Jessica's sobs grew louder, and I felt myself shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You've always been difficult, Dad said dismissively. always thinking only of yourself. If you don't help your sister," he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous low, "then you're no daughter of mine. I'll write you out of the will. You'll be cut off from the family completely." The threat might have worked years ago when I still desperately craved his approval. But something had changed. Perhaps it was the security of standing in my own home purchased with my own money. Perhaps it was the accumulation of years of unfair treatment. Whatever the reason, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "If that's your decision, then I accept it," I said quietly. "But this apartment is mine, and it's staying mine." Jessica grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, pausing only to deliver a parting shot. "I hope you're happy all alone in your precious apartment. Some things are more important than property." Dad followed her, turning at the door to deliver his own final words. "I'm disappointed in you, Angelina. I thought I raised you better than this." The door slammed behind them, leaving me standing alone in the middle of my living room, trembling with emotion and wondering if I had just lost what remained of my family. The silence after they left was deafening. I stood motionless in the center of my living room, their words echoing in my mind. Was I being selfish? Should I have agreed to give up my apartment for my pregnant sister? The doubt crept in like poison, making me question my own judgment. I sank onto my couch, pulled my knees to my chest, and let the tears come. Not dainty cinematic tears, but ugly, racking sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the little girl who never felt good enough, for the woman who still sought approval from people incapable of giving it, and for the family I might have just lost forever. My phone rang around sunset, jolting me from my emotional exhaustion. It was Maria. "How did the family visit go?" she asked cheerfully, unaware of the disaster that had unfolded. When I told her everything, her initial shock quickly turned to outrage on my behalf. "They asked you to, what are you serious after everything you did to get that place? Absolutely not." Her indignation was validating a confirmation that I wasn't crazy for refusing their demand. "But Jessica is pregnant," I said, voicing the doubt that had been gnawing at me. Maybe I should have been more understanding. "Being pregnant doesn't give her the right to take what's yours," Maria said firmly. "And frankly, something about this whole situation seems off to me. Have you considered that there might be more to the story?" "What do you mean?" "Well, for starters, why was Jessica evicted? Rental properties don't usually change ownership and immediately evict all tenants. There are laws about that, and who's the father of this baby? Why isn't he helping her find a place?" Maria's questions planted seeds of suspicion in my mind. There were indeed details that didn't quite add up. "Maybe you should do some digging," she suggested, "just to make sure you're getting the full story." At first, I resisted the idea. It felt somehow underhanded to investigate my own sister. But the more I thought about Jessica's tearful performance and my father's manipulative tactics, the more I wondered if I was missing something important. The next morning, I called my cousin Sophia, who had always been closer to Jessica than to me. I framed my questions carefully, expressing concern about Jessica's pregnancy and housing situation, rather than suspicion. "Oh, you heard about the baby?" Sophia sounded surprised. "I thought Jessica was keeping it quiet for now." "Dad told me yesterday," I explained. "They came to visit and mentioned Jessica is being evicted because her building was sold." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's not exactly what happened," Sophia finally said. "Jessica wasn't evicted. She gave notice last month because she said she found a better place." I remember because she was really excited about it, talking about how it was in this great neighborhood with good schools nearby. This new information confused me. Why would Jessica claim eviction if she had voluntarily given notice? And where was this better place she had supposedly found, thanking Sophia for the information? I decided to dig deeper. I opened Instagram and scrolled through Jessica's recent posts. She had always been prolific on social media, documenting every aspect of her life for her modest following. 2 weeks ago, she had posted photos of a brunch with friends, tagging an upscale restaurant I could never afford. A week before that, she had shared pictures of new designer shoes. There was no indication of someone in financial distress, no hint of housing insecurity, or concern about providing for an unborn child. I switched to Facebook where Jessica was less active, but where more family members might share information. Scrolling through her timeline, I noticed a comment from our Aunt Barbara 2 months ago. "Congratulations on your grandmother's inheritance. Your mother would be so proud." Inheritance. Our maternal grandmother had passed away last year, but I had no idea there had been an inheritance. No one had mentioned it to me. I quickly messaged Aunt Barbara asking about it casually. Her response came within the hour. "Yes, your grandmother left everything to be split between you girls. Didn't your father tell you Jessica got her portion about 3 months ago? I assumed you got yours too." My hands shook as I read and reread the message. Grandmother had left money to both of us, but I had received nothing, which meant either Jessica had received my portion as well, or Dad had somehow intercepted it. The investigation was becoming more disturbing by the minute. I decided to take a more direct approach and called my grandmother's longtime friend Elaine, who had helped execute the will. "Angelina, dear, it's wonderful to hear from you," Elaine said warmly. "How are you enjoying your inheritance? Martha was so specific about wanting you girls to have something to build your futures with." "Actually, that's why I'm calling," I admitted. "I never received anything from grandmother's estate." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "That's not possible," Elaine finally said, her voice hardening. "I personally made sure the funds were transferred. Your father was the trustee since the bequest specified the money would be released when you either turned 30 or purchased your first home, whichever came first. You qualified on both counts months ago." "How much was the inheritance supposed to be?" I asked, my throat tight. $200,000 for each of you," Elaine replied. "Martha sold her lake house specifically to leave something substantial for her only granddaughters." $200,000. The amount was staggering. With that money, I could have bought a much nicer apartment, or at least reduced my mortgage significantly. "I need to look into this further," Elaine said, concern evident in her voice. "This is very troubling. I'll call you back when I have more information." While waiting for Elaine's call, I continued my investigation. I reached out to a mutual friend who worked at the real estate agency Jessica had used in the past. After swearing her to secrecy, I asked if Jessica had been looking at properties recently. "Actually, yes," my friend confirmed. "She's been working with one of our agents to find investment properties. She mentioned having a substantial budget and wanting something she could flip for a quick profit." The pieces were starting to fit together in a disturbing pattern. Jessica had received a significant inheritance, was looking for investment properties, and suddenly wanted my apartment. But why mine specifically? I asked my real estate friend one more question. Did she ever mention looking at properties in Lakeview? Maybe in older buildings with character? That's exactly what she's been focusing on. How did you know she's been saying those properties have the best profit margin when updated correctly? My stomach sank. Jessica didn't need my apartment for stability or for her baby. She wanted it as an investment opportunity, a property she could renovate and sell at a profit. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Elaine called back later that day. "I've spoken with the bank and reviewed the documentation," she said gravely. "Your father did receive your inheritance as the trustee. He was supposed to transfer it to you immediately when you purchased your apartment. He signed documents confirming he would do so. But according to bank records, he transferred the entire amount to Jessica's account instead." The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it left me numb. My own father had stolen my inheritance and given it to Jessica. And now they were trying to take my apartment as well, probably to sell it for even more profit. But the most shocking discovery came that evening when I decided on a whim to check real estate listings in my area. There, to my horror, I found my exact apartment layout in my building listed as coming soon, with Jessica's name as the contact agent. Somehow, she had already started the process of selling my apartment before even securing it from me. This wasn't just opportunism. This was a calculated scheme planned well in advance. And I had all the evidence I needed for a confrontation. I spent the next day gathering and organizing evidence. Bank statements showing the transfer of my inheritance to Jessica's account, screenshots of her social media posts displaying her lavish spending, photos of the real estate listing, text messages from family members confirming both the inheritance and Jessica's voluntary departure from her previous apartment. Elaine signed affidavit stating that I was an intended recipient of my grandmother's bequest. With everything compiled in a folder, I texted my father and Jessica requesting a meeting at a coffee shop near my office. The neutral location was deliberate both to prevent another scene in my home and to ensure they couldn't simply walk out without consequences. "We need to talk about grandmother's inheritance and my apartment situation," I wrote. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Cornerstone Coffee on Michigan Avenue." Jessica replied almost immediately, "There's nothing to discuss. You made your position clear." My father's response came later. "We'll be there. Perhaps you've reconsidered your selfish stance." I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, selecting a table in the corner that offered some privacy but was still within view of other patrons. I ordered a latte and arranged my documents neatly in front of me, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. They arrived exactly on time, Dad looking stern, and Jessica wearing an expression that alternated between victimized and smug. They ordered their drinks and sat across from me, the table between us like a battlefield. "I hope you called this meeting to tell us you've changed your mind," Dad began without preamble. I took a deep breath. "Actually, I called this meeting to discuss why you stole my inheritance and gave it to Jessica." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jessica's smug expression faltered, and Dad's face flushed deep red. "I don't know what you're talking about," he sputtered. "I think you do." I opened my folder and removed Elaine's affidavit, sliding it across the table. "Grandmother left us each $200,000. You were the trustee responsible for transferring my portion to me when I turned 30, or bought my first home. Instead, you gave it all to Jessica." "That money was for both of you," Dad countered, not denying the accusation. "Jessica needed it more. You were doing fine on your own." "That wasn't your decision to make," I replied, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "Grandmother wanted us both to have it. You stole from me, Dad, and from grandmother's wishes." Jessica leaned forward, her voice low and intense. "You don't understand our situation. I have expenses needs." Expenses like these, I placed printouts of her social media posts on the table. Designer shoes, brunches at five-star restaurants, weekends at luxury spas. Those kinds of essential expenses. Jessica's face hardened. "You're spying on me now, going through my personal social media. That's really pathetic, Angelina." "Not as pathetic as lying about being evicted when you actually gave notice on your apartment," I countered, placing Sophia's text confirmation on the pile. "Or as pathetic as trying to steal my apartment to flip it for profit." I added the screenshot of the real estate listing with her name on it. Dad picked up the listing, his expression momentarily confused, before settling back into defensiveness. "Jessica has entrepreneurial ambitions. There's nothing wrong with that." "There is when it involves defrauding your other daughter," I replied. "You both lied to me. You invented a story about eviction and pregnancy concerns to manipulate me into giving up my apartment so Jessica could sell it for profit, after already stealing $200,000 from me." "The money was a family resource," Dad insisted. "I allocated it where it would do the most good." "It wasn't yours to allocate," I said firmly. "And now I have a decision to make about how to proceed." "Is that a threat?" Jessica's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "It's a reality," I replied calmly. "I have documentation proving that Dad misappropriated funds that were legally intended for me. I could take this to a lawyer. I could contact the executor of grandmother's will. I could make this very public and very messy for both of you." Dad's expression changed from defensive to calculating. "What do you want, Angelina? Money is that it? You want to extort your family now?" The accusation stung, but I refused to be deflected. "I want what's rightfully mine, my inheritance, and I want both of you to leave me and my apartment alone, permanently." "You would sue your own father?" Dad asked incredulously. "After everything I've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Dad?" I asked quietly. "You've favored Jessica my entire life. You've dismissed my achievements. You stole my inheritance, and now you're trying to take my home. Tell me, what should I be grateful for?" The question hung between us unanswerable. For perhaps the first time I saw uncertainty flicker in my father's eyes. $200,000, I continued. "That's what you owe me, plus interest for the time you've kept it from me." I want it transferred to my account by the end of the week, or my next call will be to a lawyer." Jessica laughed a brittle sound without humor. "You think we have that kind of money just sitting around? The inheritance is gone, spent, invested. There's nothing to give you." "Then you'll need to figure something out," I replied. "Sell some investments, take out a loan. That's not my problem." "This is ridiculous," Dad started, but was interrupted by the arrival of a man at our table. It was Brian, Jessica's husband of 3 years, whom I hadn't seen in nearly a year. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing Jessica's cheek before nodding to me and Dad. "Traffic was terrible." "Did I miss anything?" The awkward silence told him everything he needed to know. He looked from face to face, his expression growing concerned. "What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing," Jessica said quickly. "Just a family discussion. Why are you even here? I told you I'd meet you later." Brian frowned. "Your text said to meet you here at 2:30 to discuss the baby. I thought—" He trailed off, noticing the documents spread across the table. "What are these?" Before Jessica could stop him, he picked up the bank statement showing the transfer of my inheritance to Jessica's account. His eyes widened as he read. $200,000. "When did you get this?" he asked Jessica. "And why is Angelina's name on here too?" "It's complicated," Jessica began, but I interrupted. "It's actually quite simple. Our grandmother left us each $200,000. Dad gave Jessica both portions." "And they didn't tell you about it, did they, Brian?" Brian stared at his wife, shock evident on his face. "Is this true? You received $400,000 and didn't tell me. We've been struggling with bills, putting off starting a family because of finances, and you had this kind of money." "I was going to surprise you," Jessica said weakly, "once I had everything in place." "In place for what?" Brian asked. Then his eyes fell on the real estate listing. "You're selling property now too. Since when are you in real estate?" "She's not," I said softly. "That's my apartment she's trying to sell, the one I just bought, the one they came to demand I give to her yesterday because she was supposedly evicted and needed stability for your baby." Brian's confusion was painful to watch. "Baby? What baby?" The coffee shop seemed to freeze around us as the implication of his words sank in. Jessica wasn't pregnant. That had been a lie too, perhaps the cruelest one of all. "You told them you were pregnant." Brian's voice cracked with emotion. "How could you lie about something like that? You know how much we've wanted a child." Jessica's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they seemed genuine. "I needed them to believe me," she whispered. "I needed the apartment. It's in the perfect location, the perfect building. With some renovations, we could have sold it for twice what Angelina paid. It would have set us up for life." "Us." Brian's laugh was hollow. "There was no us in this plan. You didn't even tell me about the money. You've been lying to me, to your family, to everyone." He turned to me, his expression a mixture of anger and profound apology. "Angelina, I had no idea about any of this. The inheritance, the apartment scheme, the fake pregnancy, none of it. I swear to you." "I believe you," I said gently, seeing the genuine shock and betrayal in his eyes. Brian stood abruptly. "I need some air. I need to think." He looked at Jessica with an expression I had never seen from him before, a combination of disgust and profound disappointment. "Don't come home tonight. I can't even look at you right now." He left without another word, the bell over the coffee shop door jingling cheerfully. As he departed, a mundane sound at odds with the emotional devastation at our table. Jessica collapsed into tears, real ones this time, her shoulders shaking. Dad sat frozen, his authority and control of the situation completely evaporated. "I think we're done here," I said quietly, gathering my documents. "You have until the end of the week to transfer what you owe me, and then I never want to hear from either of you again." I stood to leave, but paused, looking down at the broken figures of my father and sister. Despite everything, a part of me still remembered the little girl who had once looked up to her big sister, and the father who had taught me to ride a bike and checked for monsters under my bed. "You know what the saddest part is," I said softly. "If you had just been honest, if you had just treated me with basic respect, I would have helped you. I would have shared." But you couldn't see me as anything but a resource to exploit. And now you've lost me completely." With those final words, I walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright afternoon, feeling both the weight of what had just happened and, paradoxically, a newfound lightness. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself against my family's manipulation. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. Walking back to my office, I felt as though I was floating above my body, watching the scene unfold from a distance. The confrontation had been even more explosive than I'd anticipated, exposing lies upon lies and causing collateral damage I hadn't foreseen. Brian's face when he realized the extent of Jessica's deception haunted me. He was as much a victim in this as I was. I called Maria immediately, needing to process what had just happened. "It was a complete disaster," I told her, recounting the meeting in detail. "Jessica isn't even pregnant. She lied about everything. And now her marriage is probably over too." "That's not on you," Maria reminded me firmly. "You didn't create the situation. You just exposed the truth." The week that followed was eerily quiet. No calls from Dad, no texts from Jessica. It was as if they had vanished from my life entirely. Part of me worried they would simply ignore my ultimatum about returning the money, forcing me to take legal action I wasn't entirely sure I had the emotional strength for. Then, 7 days after our coffee shop confrontation, I received a notification from my bank. A transfer of $215,000 had been deposited into my account, with a memo line that simply read, "Inheritance plus interest." There was no accompanying message, no acknowledgement, no apology. Just the money returned without comment. That same day, I noticed that the coming soon listing for my apartment had been removed from the real estate website. It seemed Jessica had abandoned her plan to flip my home for profit. The silence from my family continued into the second week. I found myself jumping whenever my phone rang, both dreading and hoping it might be one of them. The emotional whiplash was exhausting. One moment I felt righteous in my stand against their manipulation. The next I worried I had been too harsh, too unforgiving. On day 10, after the confrontation, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw Brian standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," he said when I opened the door. I needed to talk to someone who understands what happened, who understands Jessica." I invited him in, offering coffee, which he gratefully accepted. He looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Jessica and I are separating," he announced without preamble. "I've moved in with my brother temporarily. I just couldn't stay after everything I learned." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. Despite everything, I had always liked Brian. He was kind and hardworking, the type of grounding influence Jessica had desperately needed. "It wasn't just the lies about the pregnancy and the inheritance," he continued. "Once I started looking, I found so much more. Secret credit cards, loans I knew nothing about. She's been living a double life for years." He took a sip of coffee, his hands trembling slightly. "The thing is, I always knew Jessica was spoiled. I saw how your dad favored her. But I thought underneath it all, she had a good heart. I thought I knew who she really was." "We both did," I said softly. Or both wanted to believe we did. Brian stayed for nearly 2 hours, both of us talking through the betrayal we felt, the signs we had missed, the disillusionment that comes with realizing someone you love is not who you thought they were. It was strangely cathartic, this shared grief with my soon-to-be ex-brother-in-law. Before leaving, he handed me a USB drive. "I found this in Jessica's things. It's everything about your grandmother's estate, including the original documents showing you as a beneficiary. I thought you should have it in case you need it someday." I thanked him, touched by this final act of loyalty, not to Jessica, but to the truth. The next contact came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Barbara called, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I've just had the most disturbing conversation with Elaine," she began, "about your grandmother's will and what your father did. Is it true, Angelina? Did he really steal your inheritance?" I confirmed the story, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. Aunt Barbara had always been close to my father, her younger brother, and I expected her to defend him. Instead, she surprised me. "This explains so much," she said sadly. "The trips Jessica was suddenly taking, the new car, your father's evasiveness whenever I asked if you'd received your portion. She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. I need you to know that this isn't the first time. When your mother died, there was an insurance policy. It was supposed to be divided for both girls' education. Your father used most of it for Jessica's private school and dance lessons. I questioned it then, but he insisted it was what your mother would have wanted. The revelation about the insurance money was like a final puzzle piece, clicking into place. All those years I had worked multiple jobs to afford community college, while Jessica attended an expensive private university without financial concerns. It had been my money funding her education all along. I confronted him yesterday, Aunt Barbara continued. He tried to justify it, saying Jessica needed more support, that you were more independent. The same excuses he's always used. But this time I didn't accept them. She hesitated before adding, "We're having a family gathering next weekend. Nothing formal, just dinner at my house. Several family members want to see you. They've heard versions of what happened and they want to show their support. Would you consider coming?" The invitation was unexpected and somewhat intimidating. I had always felt like an outsider in family gatherings, the less favored daughter who didn't quite belong. "Will Dad be there? Or Jessica?" I asked cautiously. "No," Barbara replied firmly. "I've made it clear to both of them that they're not welcome until they make amends properly. This gathering is for you, Angelina, to show you that not everyone in this family condones what was done to you." After some hesitation, I agreed to attend. The gathering turned out to be a revelation. Cousins, aunts, and uncles who had always seemed distant welcomed me warmly, many apologizing for not seeing the pattern of favoritism and manipulation sooner. "We always thought you were the strong one who had everything together," my cousin Sophia admitted. "We never realized that was just the narrative your father created to justify giving everything to Jessica." As the evening progressed, other family members began sharing their own experiences with my father and Jessica's manipulations. Small inheritances that mysteriously never reached their intended recipients. Borrowed items never returned. Promises broken without consequence. "You weren't the only victim," my Uncle Robert told me quietly. "Just the most significant one." The support from my extended family was healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. For the first time, I didn't feel crazy for recognizing the unfairness of my situation. For the first time, my perspective was validated by others who had seen the same patterns. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received a text from Jessica that simply read, "Can we talk, please?" Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a park near my apartment, a public place where the conversation couldn't easily escalate. She looked different when I saw her, the designer clothes and perfect makeup replaced by jeans and a simple sweater, her face bare and vulnerable. "Brian's filed for divorce," she said after we'd sat in awkward silence on a park bench. "He says he can never trust me again." "I'm sorry," I replied, unsure what else to say. "No, you're not," she countered, but without malice. "And you shouldn't be. I did this to myself, to him, to us." She gestured vaguely between us. "To everyone." She stared at the ground, scuffing her shoe against the pavement. "Dad's not talking to me either. He blames me for the whole family finding out about the inheritance thing. Says I should have been more discreet." I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "Not that you should have been honest or fair, just more discreet in your deception." Jessica smiled ruefully. "That's Dad for you." Another silence fell between us, less awkward this time, more contemplative. "I've started therapy," Jessica finally said. "Twice a week. Turns out I have a lot of issues to work through. Narcissistic tendencies, entitlement complexes, pathological lying." She recited the diagnoses as if reading a shopping list. "The therapist says a lot of it stems from Dad's parenting, how he always made me feel special but conditional, like I was only valuable when I was getting what I wanted." "That tracks," I said softly, remembering all the times Jessica's tears had gotten her exactly what she desired. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Jessica continued. "I know what I did was unforgivable. The lies, the manipulation, trying to take your apartment. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. How toxic I've been. How toxic we all have been. I studied my sister's face, searching for signs of the manipulation I had known all my life, but all I saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. "What happens now?" I asked. Jessica shrugged. "I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to be a person I don't hate, someone who doesn't need to lie and manipulate to feel secure." She paused. "I don't expect us to ever be close, but maybe someday we could be civil. Maybe someday you won't have to dread seeing me at family functions." It wasn't a grand reconciliation. There were no tearful hugs or promises of a restored sisterly bond, but it was something, a first step toward a healthier dynamic, even if that dynamic meant maintaining significant distance between us. The final family confrontation came a month after the coffee shop meeting. My father showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Sunday afternoon. "Can I come in?" he asked stiffly when I opened the door. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. He stood awkwardly in my living room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally. "This is a nice place." "Thank you," I replied, not making it easier for him by offering coffee or inviting him to sit. "I've been doing some thinking." He continued, his discomfort evident in the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "About what happened, about the inheritance." "And," I prompted when he fell silent. "And I was wrong." He admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. "I should have given you your portion. It was yours." It wasn't exactly a full apology, but from my father, it was unprecedented. Never in my life had I heard him admit to being wrong about anything. "Why did you do it?" I asked the question that had been burning inside me for weeks. "Why have you always favored Jessica so completely?" Dad sighed heavily, finally sinking onto my couch as if his legs could no longer support him. "She reminds me of your mother," he said quietly. "The same eyes, the same laugh. After we lost her, every time I looked at Jessica, I saw Anna. And every time I looked at you." "You saw yourself," I finished for him. "The responsible one, the steady one." He nodded slowly. "You never seemed to need me the way Jessica did. You were so independent even as a little girl. You figured things out on your own. And that made it easy to focus on Jessica, to give her the attention." "I was independent because I had to be," I said, my voice catching. "Because no one was there for me otherwise. It wasn't a choice, Dad. It was survival." For the first time, I saw real understanding dawn in my father's eyes. "I never saw it that way," he admitted. "I told myself I was being fair, giving each of you what you needed. Jessica needed material support, and you needed— well, I told myself you needed independence." "What I needed was a father who valued me," I said quietly, "who saw my achievements as something to celebrate, not as proof that I deserved less support." Dad looked down at his hands. "I don't know if I can change overnight. I've been this way for a long time. But I'd like to try to do better, if you'll let me." It wasn't the effusive apology I might have once dreamed of. There was no dramatic promise to transform into the father I had always wanted. Just a small acknowledgement of harm done and a tentative offer to try to improve. "I don't know what that looks like," I admitted. "I don't know if I can trust you again." "That's fair," he said, surprising me with his acceptance. "Trust has to be earned. I haven't earned yours." We talked for another hour, setting tentative boundaries and expectations. He would respect my space and my decisions. I would consider including him in my life on a limited basis. Neither of us promised more than we could deliver. When he left, I didn't feel the emotional catharsis of a perfect resolution. There was no neat bow tying up our family drama, just the beginning of a different kind of relationship, one based on reality, rather than manipulation and denial. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset paint the Chicago skyline in shades of pink and gold. My apartment had truly become my sanctuary, every corner reflecting my personality and journey. The past half year had been transformative in ways I never could have predicted. Standing up to my father and Jessica had altered not just my relationship with them, but with everyone in my life. For the first time, I approached interactions from a place of self-worth, rather than the desperate need for validation that had driven me for so long. My relationship with Jessica had evolved into something I couldn't have imagined. After her initial apology in the park, she had continued therapy, gradually making amends in small but meaningful ways. She returned several items she had borrowed and never given back over the years, including my mother's silver bracelet that I had thought lost forever. We weren't close and perhaps never would be, but there was a new honesty between us that made our occasional interactions less fraught. She had found a job at a nonprofit, something that surprised everyone who knew her, and seemed genuinely committed to rebuilding her life on a more authentic foundation. Dad was trying in his own way as well. Our relationship remained complicated, but he had made efforts to acknowledge my achievements and respect my boundaries. For Father's Day, I had invited him to dinner at my apartment, a small step toward normalizing our relationship. He had brought a bottle of wine and a framed photo of me at my college graduation, a day he had barely acknowledged at the time. "I found this when I was cleaning out some old boxes," he had said gruffly. "Thought you might want it." It was a small gesture, but significant, coming from a man who had rarely seen value in commemorating my milestones. The most unexpected outcome of the entire ordeal was my newfound sense of mission. Using part of my recovered inheritance, I had started a small financial literacy program for women, focusing particularly on those from families with unhealthy money dynamics. Once a month, I hosted workshops in my building's community room, sharing the lessons I had learned about financial independence and the importance of protecting one's own resources. The program had started small but was growing steadily, each session bringing new participants through word of mouth. There was something profoundly healing about transforming my painful experience into a resource that could help others avoid similar situations. My friendship circle had deepened as well. Maria had been unwavering in her support throughout the entire ordeal, and our bond was stronger than ever. To my surprise, I had maintained contact with Brian, who was slowly rebuilding his life after the divorce. We met occasionally for coffee, two people united by the shared experience of having loved and been betrayed by the same person. The inheritance money had allowed me to pay down a significant portion of my mortgage, reducing my financial stress considerably. But more valuable than the money itself was the knowledge that I had fought for what was rightfully mine and won. That victory had given me a confidence that permeated every aspect of my life, from speaking up more at work to setting clearer boundaries in all my relationships. As I sat watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the city skyline, I reflected on the complex journey that had brought me to this moment of peace. The apartment around me was more than just real estate. It was a symbol of my independence, my resilience, and my worth. Family relationships were never simple. Mine remained complicated with layers of history and hurt that couldn't be erased by a single confrontation or apology. The path forward would require continued vigilance against old patterns, continued affirmation of my own value, and the wisdom to know which relationships could be healed and which were better kept at a distance. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I felt truly at home, not just in my apartment, but in my own skin. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth through achievement or sacrifice. I no longer measured my value against Jessica's or anyone else's. I had learned that self-worth comes not from external validation, but from honoring your own journey and standing firm in your truth. The apartment I had fought so hard to keep had become more than a home. It had become the foundation upon which I was building a life of authenticity and purpose, a life where I no longer accepted being treated as less than I deserved. As darkness settled over the city and lights began to twinkle in windows across the skyline, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue to protect what was mine, whether that meant material possessions, emotional boundaries, or my hard-won sense of self-worth. But I would also remain open to genuine growth and reconciliation where possible, recognizing that the strongest foundations are built not on resentment, but on truth, respect, and the courage to demand both. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of you? How did you find the courage to set boundaries with those closest to you? Drop a comment below and let me know your story. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real life stories. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and others is to say no when necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives strength to anyone facing similar challenges with family dynamics.